Unless you live under a rock, I can almost guarantee that you've, at the very least, heard of Hypixel. And that's probably because it's the most popular Minecraft server right now, averaging a player count of about 47,000, with it also reaching absurd milestones like 200,000 concurrent players, which is still the world record of most players online on a single server at the same time. Suffice to say that Hypixel has gotten incredibly popular over the last years. But this also begs the question, where did it all start? How did the Hypixel server rise to the top amidst the hundreds of other servers out there? How had the team managed to make 3 incredibly popular games that brought in massive amounts of player traction? Or, to put it more simply, what was the rise of Hypixel? On September 21st, 2012, the Hypixel forums were released, the first signs of the Hypixel server. The forums came with a message from Simon welcoming everyone to the new server being worked on called Hypixel. The forums were for people to ask questions, report bugs, or literally anything else. And it was in these forums that a small community would gather, waiting to see the release of this new server. And they kinda had to wait long, because on April 13th, 2013, that was the date that the small server by the name of Hypixel would be released. From an outside view, Hypixel looked like any old run-of-the-mill Minecraft server, but it definitely wasn't, because Hypixel had minigames on the server, specifically Quakecraft and Bowspleef, which we all know nowadays as very popular games that still retain hundreds of players and are definitely not dead. Okay, well, they may not be doing so hot right now, but back then they were pretty damn popular, to the point that the measly 500 player slots the server started off with weren't enough for the massively growing player base. It needed to be increased to 1.5 thousand a week later. Now, minigames weren't really something you'd see on many servers back then. The closest thing you'd have is Spleef, but those minigames were impractical, requiring the players to replace the blocks each time they wanted to play. But Hypixel was different. Hypixel had more complex games that were completely autonomous, without the need of a player to reset it. This single-handedly opened a new market in Minecraft servers, which would bring Hypixel some early popularity, seeing as people really like to play minigames. Just a week later, a new minigame was released called Walls, which was really well received, and people seemed to enjoy it quite a lot. The first pretty big success of the Hypixel server, which of course only added to the popularity of it. But there was one underlying issue. Since running a server costs money, Hypixel would need to find a way to monetize and be able to support the server further. So the very first rank was introduced to Hypixel, the VIP rank. This was initially implemented for players who really enjoyed the server and just wanted to give a donation, but later on was given incentives such as the VIP exclusive lobby, so the server's ranked members didn't have to communicate with the peasants, so that VIP members could chat with other VIP members about VIP member related stuff while in the VIP member lobby, and also early access to some minigames, which would provide more of a reason to purchase the rank. Throughout the next few months, Hypixel would continue to release minigames such as Vampires and TNT Run, until they struck gold when they released Blitz survival games. This minigame would become incredibly popular, boosting the server past 10,000 concurrent players, which was just insane. With this sudden boost in popularity, Hypixel became one of the most popular servers out there, right along with Mineplex. Now, I'm not going to say these two had a rivalry, but they kinda had a rivalry. A friendly one at that, but still, the two servers always seemed to be neck and neck, passing each other all the time. Nearing the end of 2013, Hypixel introduced some new ranks, such as the VIP Plus rank, which was like the VIP rank, but with a plus. There was also MVP and MVP Plus, which both sound rather interesting. Let's see how much it would cost to buy the MVP Plus rank.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna stick with my VIP rank for now. Yeah, the MVP rank costed $150, but this was also before the EULA change, which would lead the server to some massive changes with monetization. And now the rank is about $40, a pretty substantial difference from before. These ranks were also promised to be the final ones added to the server, which I'm sure is a valid promise and will be upheld forever. After that issue was solved, on June 14th, 2015, a big moment for Hypixel would occur with their newest release minigame, SkyWars. When SkyWars was released, it was an instant success, becoming incredibly popular among the Minecraft community. So how did it blow up the way it did? Well, let's start off with the main idea of SkyWars. SkyWars was a relatively simple concept at first glance. You'd spawn in your own island, collect the weapons and resources provided to you, bridge towards the middle since the closer you were to the middle, the better the chest loot would be, and then fight it out, with the last man standing being the winner. But it was just that relatively simple concept that would make SkyWars into an instant hit, going mainstream and becoming an incredibly popular minigame, played by thousands. Everywhere you turned, SkyWars was there, and it was especially prominent on YouTube, with hundreds of thousands of viewers tuning in to see this new hit minigame. This would also blast the server's player count from a bit over 10k to 45,000. SkyWars was also pretty addicting, especially since it's a really quick game that can be completed in under 5 minutes. But there were other cool features too, such as kits, which would allow you to start off with certain resources. SkyWars was so popular, in fact, that Mineplex took inspiration from it for their server 2 weeks later. To say SkyWars performed well is an understatement. achievement. It exceeded all expectations, but this was only the first of many mainstream games that Hypixel would create. But that definitely didn't happen with the next game. I think we can all agree that Smash Heroes was dead before it was even released. But wait, there's another huge issue with the server: hackers. With such a high player count, it's gotta be expected that some people would use external software that could grant them some minor advantages. This was starting to become a bigger issue as time went on, since a higher player count more likely than not would increase hacking. Something would need to be done about this issue. And something was done. On January 29th, Hypixel's very own anti-cheat detection was activated, banning over 800 players within the first wave and another 2,000 within the next 2 waves, bringing the total to 3,000 players banned. With the hacking problem all but resolved for now, Hypixel could continue on their way. Well, until they met their biggest controversy they've ever faced. Hypixel would face its biggest controversy on December 18th, 2017, with the introduction of the MVP++ rank, with this forum post announcing the rank standing at 314 dislikes compared to the 200 likes. So suffice to say, people weren't happy about this. There were many reasons as to why as well. Starting off, the rank was a subscription, not permanent, which people were not too pleased with. Second, a lot of the features clashed with the YouTube rank, screwing things up for a little while. And finally, because Hypixel broke their promise of MVP+ being the final rank way back when. To Hypixel's credit though, the massive EULA change destroyed their previous monetization, so a subscription-based rank would allow the server a passive income to keep updating. On top of that, they did a poll and the majority of people voted on adding a new rank. Since then, however, the MVP++ rank is not as hated as it had been prior. With this controversy out of the way, the server could continue adding new minigames and updating. And they did just that, by adding a new game called Sky Clash, which you probably haven't heard of. And that's because it was removed years ago, with the post announcing its removal standing at 512 dislikes. Sky Clash isn't the only game they removed a few others, but this is the one I find most interesting. Sky Clash was meant to combine the aspects of SkyWars and Blitz survival games, and looking back at the old footage of the game, it definitely looked incredibly similar to SkyWars, which was the goal, but it also didn't stand out that much, and was often confused with it just being SkyWars. And so, the admins made a forum post stating the removal of Sky Clash, which, as I said before, was incredibly disliked by most community members, with 512 dislikes. If you played Sky Clash when it was out, comment if you liked it, or if you didn't. I personally think it looked pretty fun, but I wouldn't know. Anyways, despite setbacks with minigames, the server continued to grow throughout the next few months, and grow it did, because the newest game added to the Hypixel server would surpass all others, and that game was called Hypixel Bed Wars. Like SkyWars, Hypixel Bed Wars became an instant and overwhelming success, with the minigame easily passing 10,000 players at most times. The goal was simple: destroy every other person's bed and be the last man standing. But even though the goal was simple enough, the game required a lot of strategy and outwitting your opponents to win. This combined concept of SkyWars mixed with a sort of capture the flag type game mode made Bed Wars explode in popularity. Just like SkyWars, if you looked on YouTube, someone had won a game with one hand and their eyes closed. You look to your right, someone was playing Bed Wars with their monitor turned off. This game was huge, and brought a ton of new players to the server, and also passed Mineplex, the most popular and dominant server at the time, making Hypixel the #1 server. But the rise of Hypixel doesn't end here, because there was one more game, one single game, that would bring Hypixel to over 200,000 players at one single time. And the game that would destroy Hypixel's previous player count was called Hypixel Skyblock. This game was massive for the server. Skyblock had been around for years, but this was an original take on the idea from Hypixel, and this game blew up. Partially to do with the current events going on at the time, COVID. Since many people were locked inside with nothing to do, Hypixel's player count surged to 100,000 players at peak hours, breaking records. There were also tons of YouTubers playing the game, only adding to the popularity. Hypixel Skyblock was nothing like the regular Skyblock we're all used to, basically being a fully fleshed out RPG, with bosses, insane tools, auction houses, and different islands, you name it. This was the biggest game the Hypixel had ever made. But this wasn't the end of it, because an event would take place on this game that would bring the player count past 200,000 players. Though for this to make sense, I'll need to provide some context about this event. You see, on Hypixel Skyblock, elections are held every so often in-game, where you can vote on different candidates, which would all provide different stat increases while they were in office. But during one election, a new candidate would arrive, and his name was Dante. Now, unlike other mayors which would tell you directly what they'll boost, all that Dante's perks said were that he'd strengthen security and fix this rapidly declining system permanently. Dante ended up winning the election and then basically added attacks to everything, like talking and walking, which people were thrilled about and acted about as calmly as you'd expect. But in the midst of all this chaos, a rebellion against Dante had been called to action. But who would lead the resistance? Well, players were actually given the ability to vote on who would have that rank. Players could vote on a selection of YouTubers who would lead the resistance, and one of them was Technoblade, and he won by a landslide with 180,000 votes. So the event would take place later on, and that would bring the server over 200,000 concurrent players, which was just absurd to even think about. It also got them a Guinness World Record for most concurrent players online, and to this day, it still remains as the world record. And so, Hypixel, from a server once pulling a couple hundred players, is now the largest server in all of Minecraft. This was the Rise of Hypixel.